You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. A Senate seat in Washington's 26th district is looking like a barn burner. The district covers Gig Harbor, Bremerton, Port Orchard, and the Key Peninsula, and Democrats are hoping to keep that district from flipping. Democratic Senator Deb Krishnadasan is the appointed incumbent in this fight. She finished the primary about 1,000 votes ahead, setting up an incredibly tight race this November. She'll square off against Republican Representative Michelle Caldier, who has served the district for 5 terms in the House. It's a classic Republican versus Democratic race with the potential to diminish Democratic control in the Senate. And of course, there is major spending on this race. It's so close. Candidates have raised nearly $900,000. There's outside PAC money involved. There's all kinds of money flowing in here because it is so close and a consequential race. So we're going to talk to both of the candidates on Soundside this week. Senator Deb Krishnadasan is here with me now. The Democrat in the race. Senator, thank you very much for being here.
Libby, good morning. Thanks for having me.
So this is the first time you're facing voters as a lawmaker. You were a school board member for the Peninsula School District in Gig Harbor. You were appointed to the seat to fill the vacancy that Emily Randall left when she went to Congress. Let's just hear first for voters your elevator pitch and why they should keep you in the Senate.
Yeah, so I have not been elected as a legislator. So I was appointed, as you said, but came out very strong in the primary. And I really attribute that to what I have gotten done and how I approach it. I really focus on bringing people together and delivering results. I've done that quite a bit in my volunteering years for the past 18 years in our community. I was able to get a bond passed for the first time in our community in 2 decades. We passed it at 67%. That was a really, truly a great effort of bringing a community together and getting things done. Really a testament to how I approach my work. And then in my first session, just getting in there after being appointed in December, I passed 6 bipartisan bills my first 4 months on the job, and worked on improving safety, protecting health care for pregnant women in the emergency room. And I also introduced the first sales tax reduction proposal in decades, wanted to give relief to working families immediately. And then really, when budgets came forward, I voted against them. So I'm going to continue to work for people and focus on the real issues that people are facing today.
You mentioned specifically the budgets. The tax package is something that's going to come up in this race a lot. We're going to talk about that in just a minute, that you did vote against in opposition with your party. So this race is bringing in a lot of money, both the money that candidates are raising and the outside spending. A lot is right now coming to support Michelle Caldier, your opponent, from the business community. You are seeing a lot of support from especially labor. Do you see yourself as an anti-business candidate? Because it seems as though that amount of spending on the Republican candidate from the business community is giving that impression. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't see myself as the anti-business candidate. I think the reaction to that is purely the Democratic Party that they're looking at and the decisions that came out of last session. In fact, I've had several reach out to me and say, hey, this is nothing against you. We enjoyed working with you. You listened to us. You considered our position and even brought our voice to the table sometimes. So I don't think it was a direct attack on me, just the situation. But back to your point about unions and environmental folks and other organizations, our firefighters, they came to me and endorsed me and are supporting me. And the thing that is just so amazing to me on that, like every dollar I get from those folks has a face attached to it. That came out of someone's paycheck. And these, again, I go back to who I'm working for. I'm working for the people in our state. I'm working for our working families. I'm working for our seniors. And those are where my donations are coming from. And it feels really good to have that support.
So let's talk about that tax package that Democrats passed. Republicans are trying to tie you to that. So lawmakers last year found out there was a $16 billion hole in the state budget. Your colleagues found some cuts this year, but they also raised taxes by $9 billion over the next 4 years. It's the biggest increase in state history. Republicans quickly pointed out that you were, part of the party that passed those taxes. However, you voted against the tax package. What was your biggest concern here, and what is your message to voters about these taxes that your party did pass?
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Yes, voted against the taxes and that budget because right now, families are struggling more than ever. We have an affordability crisis, and the idea of putting additional taxes directly on people that are struggling the most was just something I didn't feel good about and had to vote against it. At the same time, I looked at the Republican budget and I saw Doge-style cuts, cutting critical programs in our state, cuts that would have been devastating, especially with the anticipated federal cuts that we're already seeing, and more anticipated. These cuts are going to hurt families and people that are struggling most in our state. When I look at policies that are either overburden on working families or slash services on programs that we depend on. We just need to find a balance and common sense, and that's what I'm working for there, and that's what I'm going to go back down there to work on.
Shortly after the new tax package was signed by Governor Ferguson, the state budget forecast estimated that tax collections for the 2-year operating budget were going to be hundreds of millions of dollars lower than anticipated. So we have a revenue problem still in the state, or, a spending and revenue problem, depending on how you look at it. You're concerned about new taxes. You've expressed concern and their impact on the cost of living in Washington. So what kinds of solutions do you want to look for if you're not in favor of new taxes?
Well, in terms of if we will go back down there and see a deficit, we don't know that yet. We don't know that there will be a deficit when we return. If there is, we don't know what the extent of that deficit is going to be. Any speculation of that, right, or any projection of that right now is pure speculation. Before the session begins, we'll have a clearer picture of that. We'll understand the state revenues and our caseloads that we're experience, and we'll get a better picture. If we do face a deficit, it's going to be working with Governor Ferguson. It's going to be working with people across the aisle. We're going to need to come together. We're going to need to look for savings and efficiencies, increase efficiencies within the government. That's, I think, the first approach. That's the one I'm going to support, while still protecting the programs that we need. We don't want to hurt those that need it most in our community.
Your opponent, Representative Michelle Caldier, is saying you're a Democrat. The Democrats have been in power for too long in Olympia. The taxes and spending is just one example of that. And the best way to slow the Democrats down is not to elect a moderate Democrat who might break with her party sometimes, but to elect a Republican. What do you think about that?
Well, that's interesting because her position on this is she wants to break the supermajority. And the reality is neither the Senate or the House has a supermajority when it comes to legislation. You need 2/3 of the House or the Senate to have a supermajority, and we just do not have that.
Let me just explain to folks, because the supermajority, a 2/3 majority, would be a veto-proof power for the legislature. It would allow the legislature to amend the Constitution. So the Democrats don't have that. What Caldier, I think, is trying to say is that the 3/5 or 60% threshold, which you do represent the final piece of that for the Democrats, allows them to issue debt without voter approval. So borrow money, basically. So that she's trying to say that is a kind of supermajority that's important too. But yeah, sorry, just had to explain that because it's kind of complicated.
Yeah. It is. So, yeah, we don't have a true supermajority to change the Constitution, and the seat's not going to change that. but regardless of all of that, I'm focused on what I can do, not as a member of a political party, but as a legislator that's working for my district. That's what I'm going to stay true to, and that's what I'm going to be working on. And again, I think my very first session reflects that. Passing six bipartisan bills, my very first session down there, working with across the aisle, bringing pause to some of the work that the Democrats were approaching, and bringing some balance to some of the legislation that we did pass last session.
One of the more hotly contested bills that passed last session was the cap on rent increases. People call it rent control. It's a limit on rent hikes to somewhere between 7 and 10% per year. Republicans are strongly opposed to this. They say it could discourage badly needed development. You voted for the rent increase cap. Why did you support it?
Yeah, so rent stabilization, that has been introduced in legislation for many years. So when I got down there, that bill was going to get passed this year. And I what I mentioned earlier, I brought pause to some of the legislation that was being considered and brought some more balance to it. Um, in terms of why we need rent stabilization, why it's important at this time and in this state, I had three gentlemen come down to my office and talk about their rent experiences in their neighborhood. Their rent increased from 450 to 650 to 850. They're now being asked to move out of their home. They're going to have to move out of the district, take their kids out of schools. These are the types of things. Renters don't have that predictability of what their payment is going to be as renters. And this rent stabilization bill gave that little bit of stability to our renters to keep people in their homes, to keep people in their communities. So that's why it's important. But I hear the concerns. It was the way it was approached and positioned. It was very aggressive. It was more aggressive than California, more aggressive than Oregon. And I think the work that I did with other Democrats within the party, we brought some more balance to it. So we got it to a 7% rent cap with a CPI, so up to 10%. Most of the landlords I talked to, they only raise rent 2 to 3%. It's the folks that are going extreme and being egregious with their rent increases that we're trying to bring some stability to.
Cost of living is just a major issue across the board in Washington state. There are a few different studies, but a single person in Washington state, it looks like, needs to make on average more than $100,000 to live comfortably when it comes to housing, when it comes to everything else. Republicans say that Democrats are focused too much on protecting certain issues, but they don't look at the wider issue of affordability for everybody. The Republicans have said that, this focus on renter protection, is actually going to harm small housing providers, discourages new development, and that in the long term would mean increases in rent and housing costs. Do you think your caucus is on the right track to control costs, and how do you respond to those concerns from Republicans about this bill?
I think we're on the right track because we are focused on helping people that need it the most in this state. We currently have a system that leans too heavily on our working families, our small businesses, and I think we're trying to relieve some of that pressure. People in those situations shouldn't have more taxes right now. They should have less. So when we're thinking about revenues, my first thought is how do we take taxes away from those folks that are struggling the most? That's the approach I would like to take. They don't need more right now, they need less. And so if we continue to focus on that, while still supporting we have a very robust and booming economy here in the state. We are a great, strong state with our economy, and we need to make sure that there is balance in the legislation that we do and put forth so that we can continue that. And I think we will. I mean, it's been done in the past and we continue to grow in this state. So, um, yeah, we have work to do. And I look forward to working across the aisle as well. The Republicans have ideas that we can help stabilize what we're doing here in the state to keep businesses booming, keep our revenue strong, and protect the people that need it the most.
I talked to the conservative political donor Brian Haywood this week, and his group Let's Go Washington is gathering signatures starting this week for two new initiatives. And I wanted to ask you about them because they're probably going to go to the legislature if he gets the signature minimum by January. He has been successful in the past at getting these before the legislature, and last year they passed half of what he presented and then sent half to voters. One of these would undo Democratic changes to the so-called Parents' Bill of Rights. And this gets pretty complicated, but basically, Haywood had, presented this bill to the legislature or initiative to the legislature that says, schools need to notify parents about more things, shorten the notification window. Specifically, medical and counseling records were part of his focus. The legislature adopted the initiative, but then Democratic lawmakers went back to make changes to the law. They wanted to roll back things that they said were in conflict with existing state law, kind of align it with other parts of the code. Now Haywood is attempting to undo those changes, and he wants this, I think from what I heard from him, to be kind of a proxy battle about this idea that schools are indoctrinating kids with dangerous ideas, either presenting like gender affirming care to them in an inappropriate way, or even convincing them that adopting a trans identity would be beneficial. So I guess what I want to know is, when you're in, a position of having to review this legislation, these initiatives from Brian Haywood, how will you respond? Do you support undoing the changes that the legislature made to the Parents' Bill of Rights earlier this year?
Thanks, Libby. That is a big bill, and there's a lot in it. There's parents' right, there's students' right, there's teacher protections, and more. So it was a very big bill, and very, I think a lot of it that's out there right now is being misinterpreted. I believe parents should have access to their children's education. Parents, in my opinion, are the most important teachers for our children. So I want them involved in that. This bill does not take that away. As a school board member, I worked to make sure that all students feel safe in school, free from discrimination, and that they are in a supported environment and where they can focus on learning. And I think that's what this bill is trying to do, is to create that space for all children.
And that's the bill that the legislature passed, the Democrats in the legislature passed, is what you're saying.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. The parental right bill is what, as you referred to it as. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
From my experience as a board member in schools, like on the ground in the schools, and as a very involved parent, I think this bill strikes a very good balance. Parents still have access to curriculum. Parents can review textbooks and review teaching materials. They even have input on what curriculum is adopted in a classroom or in a school. And at the end of the day, they always have the right to opt their child out. And so again, I think this bill strikes the right balance, protecting our most vulnerable students in our system, while providing opportunities for our parents to be very engaged in their students' education. And bottom line, I mean, as a parent, if I wanted to know what was going on with my child, what they were learning, I'm going to go ask my child. And I think that's the majority of what parents do in the first place. So yes, I think this bill strikes a good balance.
So you would not support Brian Haywood's repeal, which he says would give parents access to mental health records, medical records faster. But you think that the Democrats struck the right balance when they tweaked the legislation?
Yes, I do. I do. And schools don't have medical records. So there's no medical records to be, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we are, just out of time, and we are at a point where I think voters who want to kind of get a last overview of your case for staying in your seat in the Senate. Let's just have like a final minute of like leaving us with, why do you think you deserve to remain in office and voters should vote for you this November?
Yeah. Thanks, Libby. This has been fun. I stepped into public service to focus on real issues that people and families are facing. As we see politics being more and more polarized, I think we're losing sight of the reality that too many of our neighbors are struggling to afford life. And this is the work that I actually want to be focused on. I'm deeply concerned about the future our kids are inheriting. I don't think they have the same opportunities that we had when we were starting off. And I don't want that to be the new normal. We need to do better. I choose to serve to help people, and that's what I'm working on. I'm not a career politician. I'm bringing fresh eyes to really decade-long problems. I bring civility. I bring common sense. I bring the ability to build relationships, bring people together, and deliver results. That's the kind of legislator that I have been, and I will want to continue to be for our district.
State Senator Deb Krishnadasan is running to keep her seat in the 26th Legislative District, which includes Gig Harbor, Bremerton, Port Orchard, and the Key Peninsula. Thank you very much for being here, Senator, and I hope we can keep the conversation going.
Absolutely, and we must. Keep talking. Thanks, Libby.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. By the way, this show is only possible because listeners support us. If you are able to give right now, check out the show notes for a link to donate. And don't forget, you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org.